Services now contribute almost 80% of economic output in the UK. And the British Finance Minister or Chancellor of the Exchequer wants new growth with the help of a sector that has long been sidelined. British Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt wants to stimulate the stagnating economy in Great Britain, and he did that on Wednesday. He said it's a turning point for the economy, as he said in an interview already before his budget statement in Parliament, saying now is the moment to focus on growth. The Tory politician is particularly focusing on a sector of the economy that has been politically sidelined in London for a long time, and that's the British industry. At the annual meeting of the British Industry Association CBI, Hunt announced that he would launch a range of measures to promote business investment. And according to reports, the finance minister is primarily thinking about permanently anchoring the generous depreciation options for investments. He also wants to provide more than £4 billion to support strategically important industrial sectors. On Monday, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also hinted at possible tax cuts. Over time, we can and will reduce taxes, said Sunak in London. I will talk about this week more, of course. But we also have to talk about the consequences of some still running Brexit transitional periods today. Deutsche Börse's derivatives arm said on Tuesday that it has been building up volume in its Euribor futures contract in Frankfurt as the European Union vies with London for the multi-billion euro market post-Brexit. The EU wants to significantly relocate the clearing of Euribor futures and euro-denominated interest rate swaps, so-called IRS, out of London, which is now largely cut off from the Union's financial market and the rules since its 2020 exit from the EU. And Matthias Graulich, executive board member at Deutsche Börse's Eurex clearing, said its share in Euribor futures trading and clearing had reached 10% on November 20th since it relaunched the contract on November 1st, backed by incentives for customers. The market had previously dominated by US rival ICE with its operations based in London. It's a very good start in trying to build an alternative liquidity pool, though it's early days, is what Graulich told Reuters. ICE had no immediate comment there. EU states and the European Parliament are thrashing out a deal on a draft law that would require banks and asset managers in the Union to have an active account with an EU-based clearinghouse. It is likely that in the initial phase there will be no mandatory minimum clearing volume set for an account, but this could change if not enough clearing shifts. Ideally, the currently discussed softer Phase 1 active account requirement would be followed by some substantial transfer of euro derivatives exposures into the EU until Phase 2, is what Graulich said. In this situation, a Phase 2 with potentially hard thresholds would not be needed anymore, he said. London Stock Exchange Group's LCH dominates clearing of Euro IRS, a market in which Eurex is also slowly building up clearing volume and which is being targeted by the Madrid exchange too. Brussels has allowed clearers in London to continue serving customers in the Union until June 2025, though LSEG CEO David Schwimmer said last week he was optimistic that EU customers will still be allowed to clear in London after that deadline. Well, I have my doubts a little bit. But we also need to talk about news that the UK and South Korea are launching trade talks now. The UK and South Korea are to launch talks on a new trade deal and sign a diplomatic accord as part of Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch began negotiations with her Korean counterpart Bang Moon-kyu at the UK-Korea Business Forum at Mansion House on Wednesday. They also announced £21 billion of investments committed by Korean businesses in green energy and in infrastructure projects across the UK. The UK secured a free trade deal with South Korea in 2019, with the agreement largely aimed at keeping trade flowing post-Brexit and removing uncertainty. So a lot of copy and paste here. The UK hopes to secure modern digital provisions in a new deal because most of its services exports to Korea are delivered digitally. And Mrs. Badenoch said about this, "The government is upgrading our trade deal with South Korea to ensure that our trading relationship plays to the UK's strength as an advanced high-tech economy. This refreshed, modernized deal will boost our world-leading services sector while also creating new opportunities for UK exports, such as in our world-leading food and luxury goods sectors." Mr. Yoon began his state visit on Tuesday with a welcome from the King and Queen. He held a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and signed the new long-term agreement covering defense and technology cooperation in Downing Street on Wednesday. The Downing Street Accord followed similar agreements with Singapore and Japan, coming as the UK seeks to consolidate influence in the so-called Indo-Pacific region. It included a defense agreement that will boost the British and Korean militaries' cooperation on countering smuggling in the East China Sea, which North Korea relies on to evade sanctions. And Defense Secretary Grant Shapps said about this, "The UK is leading the way in supporting our Korean friends in countering North Korea's aggressive posturing and ensuring the safety and security of the Indo-Pacific. Deepening the ties between the Royal Navy and the Republic of Korea Navy, our bilateral defense relationship has never been stronger." And Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron said, "This agreement, signed 70 years after the Korean War armistice, is a truly unique step in the strengthening of our work to secure the security of the Korean Peninsula and the region. We are proud, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, to be at the forefront of international sanctions enforcement activity. This includes upholding international commitments to curtail North Korea's illegal weapons programs." A new clean energy partnership was also signed, bolstering collaboration on low-carbon technologies, civil nuclear, and policies to tackle climate change. Downing Street said the accord will also see the countries work closer together on technologies such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and quantum. Science ministers also signed a memorandum of understanding to boost space cooperation. South Korea will host next year's AI summit after the first UK-backed gathering in Bletchley Park earlier this month. The UK visit coincides with the 140th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the UK and Korea, as well as the 70th anniversary of the armistice of the Korean War. But not so diplomatic was another topic, because the UN criticizes British restrictions on fundamental rights. It's not just the deportation plans for asylum seekers that are subjecting the British government to sharp criticism. The United Nations and human rights organizations are also calling for harsh punishments against climate activists. The British government is not only contradicting the United Nations with its migration policy, but also with its actions against traffic blockades by those climate activists. The UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Issues and Climate Change, Ian Fry, addressed the London Home Office to ask why sentences against two English activists who blocked a motorway bridge over the Thames a year ago were significantly harsher than previous sentences in similar cases. The demonstrators, whose action disrupted traffic on the London Ring Road for a day, were sentenced to prison terms of 3 years and 2 years and 7 months, and their appeal was unsuccessful. Fry also opposed new restrictions on street protests, which have been summarized in a British public order law since this summer. They would obviously be a direct attack on the right to peaceful assembly. And the UN Special Rapporteur told the BBC on Monday that the UK Home Office had so far failed to respond to his written concerns, indicating a general disregard for human rights issues by the current government. The Home Office, however, said it had responded to Fry and also stated that peaceful protest is a crucial part of democratic society and has a long tradition in the United Kingdom, provided it stays within legal limits. Well, they narrowed the limits a bit, though. According to the human rights organization Civicus, the restrictions on the right to demonstrate, which among other things make being chained to objects a prison sentence and eject demonstrators with a criminal record on suspicion, are so serious that, in terms of endangering civil liberties, they put Great Britain in a row with countries like El Salvador or East Timor. Civicus is a global network based in South Africa. The classification is based on data collections from 200 countries. There is a public dispute in the Conservative ruling party over the future course of migration policy after the United Kingdom Supreme Court declared it unlawful to deport asylum seekers who are trafficked into the country via the English Channel to Rwanda without any checks. And while former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who was fired last week, publicly called for the refugees to be exempt from any human rights requirements in order to save the Rwanda plan, her successor, the previous Foreign Minister James Cleverly, is opposing calls for the country to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and ignore the United Nations human rights records. One of the provisions that would have to be expressly repealed is the National Human Rights Law, which represents a kind of British catalogue of fundamental rights. After the failure of the Rwanda plans in the Supreme Court, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak promised that he would pursue the deportation plans whatever it takes. The new legislation envisaged for this purpose is not yet available. Not only Home Secretary Cleverly, but also the new Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron has announced resistance to the demands of the right wing of the party to terminate the European Convention on Human Rights. Cameron said it was possible to simply not abide by the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, whose rulings are based on the Council of Europe-sponsored convention. As head of government, he once made a ruling that certain British prisoners should not be automatically be deprived of their right to vote, though. But I also have some bad news for Game of Thrones fans today. And here we come back to Irish. The Broad Beach Avenue in Northern Ireland became world famous after an 8-second appearance in the series Game of Thrones. But now some of those trees you've seen there are being felled. So this mystical beach avenue in Northern Ireland became internationally famous thanks to a scene in the TV series Game of Thrones. And now 6 trees in the street called Dark Hedges are being felled due to old age and storm damage, of course. Branches are removed from other trees, and work began in the County Antrim on Monday under the watchful eyes of several tourists, as the Belfast Telegraph newspaper reported. The road has been closed to cars for years anyway, after visitors hunting for a photo regularly caused traffic chaos there. And pedestrians are now not allowed to walk through the avenue between the towns of Armoy and Strankham. So 2 surveys have shown that some trees needs to be removed for safety reasons. That was said by the Dark Hedges Preservation Trust. While we would like these trees to last forever, the reality is against it. They are 300 years old and this work needs to be done, they say. What is needed is a long-term plan and new planting. 8 seconds in Game of Thrones changed the road and the dark hedges forever, according to the trust. Of the original 150 beech trees, 86 were still standing. However, an investigation by the Ministry of Infrastructure revealed that 11 trees were in poor condition and posed a potential danger. In discussions, landowners and other stakeholders agreed to remove 6 trees and work on 4 more. The decision was not taken lightly, as the ministry said. While the avenue's recreational value is recognized, the safety of road users is a priority. The trees were once planted along the road, which led to a Grace Hill house built in 1775. And I cannot do this video today without talking about some, let's call it Brexit hypocrisy. You will remember from early videos in Brexit James Dyson, the billionaire inventor of the bagless vacuum cleaner. And he told London's High Court a 22 newspaper column that branded him a hypocrite who had screwed Britain was not only wrong but incredibly harmful to his reputation. And Dyson is suing the Daily Mirror publisher MGN over print and online articles by Brian Reed that lambasted him for moving the global head office of his company from Britain to Singapore after championing the economic benefits of Brexit. And under the headline, "Message to Young Folks Today is that cheats do prosper," Reed included Dyson in a rogues gallery of people whom it was alleged had acted illegally or dishonestly, as the 76-year-old said in a witness statement published on Tuesday. Dyson said that, as someone who had invested heavily in Britain and its young people, he found the criticism particularly damaging and distressing. MGN argued in its defense that an honest person could hold the opinion that Dyson was a hypocrite, given he had publicly supported the benefits of Britain leaving the European Union and then moved his company's global head office abroad after Brexit. Dyson's approach to the lawsuit was wholly disproportionate and abusive, and MGN would seek to have the case thrown out of court at the end of the trial. And MGN's lawyer Adrian Page said that in court filings. Dyson's company, which makes vacuum cleaners, air purifiers, and other appliances, said in January 2019 it was moving its corporate office to Singapore to be closer to its Asian markets. It said at the time the move was not driven by Brexit or by tax, with much of its product development remaining in southwest England. And Dyson said on Tuesday that Asia was logically the right place for the company, given its manufacturing and much of its sales were there. The decision to establish the global headquarters had nothing to do with Brexit at all, nor did it conflict with or render hypocritical my previous statements, let alone amount to me screwing the country or setting a poor moral example to young people, as he said in a statement. It simply reflected the long-term commercial reality of Dyson's global business operations. Well, from an outside view, I have a very firm opinion on what that meant and what happened there and what people would regard as lame excuses. But before I get sued by Dyson, very funny. Now, of course, I leave it to all of you to judge yourself, but I presented you the full picture on what happened, what Dyson did during the Brexit campaign, and I leave it to you to make your own judgment. But I definitely have made mine. And if you want to see something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.